Hello everyone, my name is Aaron Donaldson and I'm a Customer Success Specialist here at Cisco. In today's how-to video, I will explain what system bind variables are and how you can use them in your CLI templates. So let's go in and start talking about what system bind variables are. So system bind variables are special variables which are made available by Catalyst Center, and they allow you to reference information that Catalyst Center already knows about devices in your inventory or configuration in the platform itself. They can provide device-specific information, they can reference global network settings configurations that you've made, or they can even reference information about network profiles that you've created. System bind variables are hugely useful. However, it's important to remember that they can only be used in day-end templates. They will not work in day-zero templates. And there's a special reason for this. That's because the values that system bind variables provide are learned information. They're based upon configuration that has happened in Catalyst Center or devices that have been onboarded into Catalyst Center. So always remember that system bind variables can only be used in day-end templates. Next, they can be bound to a template in two different ways, or there's two different methods of binding them to a template. The first method is via the Variables tab when you're in the CLI Templates editor mode. The second method is that you can reference them directly in the text of your templates as you're writing them in the Templates tab by writing in the actual name of the variable, and each of these system bind variables have a special naming convention. Alright, well, we'll get on to the demo here in just a minute, but first let's talk about what the prerequisites are. So for this demonstration, we're going to be using Catalyst Center version 2.3.7.9, which is the current recommended release, but the same configurations and processes should be identical in version 2.3.7.7 or higher. Next, you'll need a network hierarchy built out because we'll need at least some sites to be able to mess around with network profiles and network settings. The next thing is that you'll need one or more network profiles created, and you'll also have to configure some basic global network settings in the network settings interface. And then finally, you'll need one or more managed devices that are added to your inventory and are reachable by Catalyst Center. So we'll begin by logging into Catalyst Center and landing on the main splash page here. In order to take a look at our CLI templates, we'll go to the menu in the upper left corner and down to Design, and we will click on CLI Templates. So this is our interface for managing and configuring, editing, and attaching the network profiles of all CLI templates that we create. And if we wanted to create a new project, we could do that from this Add menu. But in this case, we'll create a new template. So we'll give it just a generic name. We'll choose a project for it to be part of. And we'll choose a software type. We'll choose a device family to make this valid for. And we'll hit Continue. So this creates our new template. Now at this point we can begin typing in any of our template content, but if we wanted to use our system bind variables for this template, there is a link on the Templates tab at the very upper left corner that says System Variables Assistant. If we click on that link, we'll get a pop-out that shows all of the system bind variables that are available to us. So as you can see, we have sources of variables coming from either common settings, which would be like our global network settings, or device inventory, or from network profiles. And based on my experience, 99% of the time, we're going to be using the device system bind variables and the interface system bind variables, both from inventory. So let's experiment a little bit. Let's create a variable in our template, and since we're using Jinja, we'll use the Jinja syntax of double curly braces and then variable, and then we'll close with double curly braces, and we'll click Save. So I've defined a custom variable named variable, and if we go to the Variables tab, we'll see it show up along the left-hand side. Now at this point, we can change this from a user-defined variable to a bound-to-source variable. And when we do that, it gives us many more options here for us to fill out. We can choose the type of data entry, whether we want a text field or a single select drop-down list or a multi-select drop-down list. We can then choose our source, which, because most of the time we're going to be using device and interface inventory variables, we'll choose inventory. Next, we'll pick the entity here. So in this case, it would be either device or interface. We'll start with device. And then we can choose the attribute that we want to bind this to. So we'll just type in hostname, for instance. This is one of the available attributes. So what we're going to do is change this to a multi-select field this time. We're going to keep our source as inventory, and this time I'm going to pick interface. And our attribute should be interface name. So let's see, port name, I believe is what it's called. There we go. All right, and we'll save this. What this configuration will do is give us now a drop-down list whose values will be the port name or the interface name of each interface. And it's a multi-select list, so we can choose multiple interfaces from that drop-down. So if we go back to simulation and we create a test simulation, we choose our target device, we'll see that we have 0 selected in this multi-drop-down list. If I click on 0 selected, I now get a populated multi-select drop-down list or scrolling table here of device interfaces. And I can select the number of interfaces that I want, as many as I want, and then click apply. So now within our template, we've created effectively a list or an array containing these 6 interface names inside that array. So this is definitely the most flexible means of configuring system bind variables in your templates. It gives you a lot of capabilities to change the data type and the attributes that are shown. However, sometimes we want something just a little bit simpler. Maybe we don't need to have a big drop-down list or something like that, but maybe instead we want to reference the device's management IP address or something like that. So what we can do is go back to our system variable assistant, and we'll scroll down to inventory and then device. And you can see that the variable name here is listed as _device. All system bind variables start with a _. If I expand this section, you'll see that we have a bunch of attributes or methods that are associated with this variable. That's because this is effectively a Python dictionary or a key value pair object in Java, and it has various keys which have values stored in them. So let's say I want to select the device's management IP address, and that would be right here. This is the name of the variable, and I can reference it directly in my template. So I could simply say double curly brace and then paste in device.management IP address, and then close that out and click Save. Now if I go to my Simulation tab and I click Create Simulation, we'll give it a test name again, and we'll choose our same device from our inventory. When I run this template, all it's going to do is grab the device's management IP and print it out in place of the variable that I put in our template. So this is one other way that we can use to reference system bind variables in our templates. The last thing that we'll show you here is a special template that will help you to understand what values are available in those system bind variables. So I have created a template that's very simple, and it has a loop. And this loop allows you to go through and grab all of the key names and value names for the attributes in the _device system bind variable, and then also the interface system bind variable. The interface variable is kind of special, and I'll show you briefly why it's slightly different. If we look at inventory device, we'll see that we have the main variable name _device followed by a period and then individual attributes that are available in it. However, if we look at interface and we expand it, we'll see that the syntax is a little bit different. Now we have double underscore interface followed by square brackets and an index, and then a dot, and then our attribute name. The reason for this is that this is effectively, as we said, a dictionary or a key value pair object like you would find in Java. And so it's one object that contains uniquely named keys in it with values stored in those keys. But there's only one device. There will only ever be one device for each managed device in Catalyst Center. So we can't have multiple host names, multiple management IPs. However, we know that all devices have more than one interface. And in that case, we have to create a dictionary or a key value pair object for each interface to contain all of its attributes. But then there are multiple interfaces, so we have to group those together into what would be a Python list or a Java array. It's essentially a grouping of objects. That's the reason why index is spelled out here, because we have to loop through it. For each object that is contained in that array, we're going to have unique values for each of these same attribute names. And it's maybe a little hard to understand, but we'll show you the example here using this template. So as you can see here, I've got a single for loop for device details, and I'm saying for the key and the value in double underscore device dot items. This dot items is a special method that's available for this object type. And it basically creates a grouping of all of the items that are contained in this dictionary. So for each one of those items, I want to print out the key's name and the value stored in it. For interface details, we've got one level above this. First, we're looping through just the variable itself because it's an array. It has multiple dictionaries in it. And then each time we loop through, we obtain one of the dictionaries within that array. And now we can loop through that dictionary inside our outer loop. We can loop through those individual items in the dictionary and print out the keys and values. So again, might seem a little confusing, but let me demonstrate what this does. If we go to the simulation tab and we maybe create a new simulation, we'll give it test2 as a name and we'll pick our device, edge switch 2. When I run this, it'll take just a minute to run, but what you get is a long list of all of the device's system bind variable attributes and the values stored in them. And you'll see things like, MAC address, management IP address, the device's platform ID or PID, its role, all this information. And that's just one object here for the device itself. But below that, we have interface details, and there are multiple interfaces on this device. So, for instance, this is interface 10 gigabit Ethernet 103, and we can see things like its MAC address, its speed, the VLAN ID that it's assigned, its MTU, its admin status, etc. But as we keep looping through it, we'll see more and more interfaces. 10 gigabit Ethernet 115, 114, 106. And yes, these are stored out of order. It's an unfortunate artifact of how this information is stored in the database, but they don't come in numerical order, which would be nice. So we just have to understand these interfaces are going to be printed out in a random order. But that one small little template gives us almost 2,200 lines of output just by a couple of for loops. And this will allow you to see the values that are stored in each one of these system bind variables per interface and per device. So we'll give you one last look at the content of this template, and we'll pause for a moment here as well so that you can get a copy of this off of the video itself. But this concludes our demonstration here for system bind variables. So if you would like a little more detail or more information about Catalyst Center, you can visit our YouTube channel. You can also go to the Catalyst Center user guide, and this is the link directly to the section that talks about system bind variables. And I've also got links to documentation for the Jinja templating language and the Velocity templating language. So that's it. Thanks for watching.